Greetings, fellow travelers through the liturgical year. This is Lisa Davis on the feast of Saint David of Wales, who happens to be our family's surname patron. For anyone who hasn't heard the podcasts in which we've referenced this special perk towards spiritual riches, many people have last names that have an obvious connection to saints. For instance, if your last name is Peters, like a dear friend of ours, you get to claim the great Saint Peter, our first pope, as your patron. Or you could adopt Saint Peter Damian, whose feast was last week, or Saint Peter Claver, or all Saint Peters if you really want to. Or if you're a Johnson, you can choose from among a quantity of Saint Johns. These family friends are pretty self-apparent. Those families whose name doesn't directly connect to a patron saint like this, though, can sometimes be Catholic hacked to discover a patron. For instance, if your last name is Carpenter, you get to extrapolate the patron saint of carpenters, Saint Joseph. The patron saint of millers is Saint Nicholas of Myra, and Smiths could claim Saint Clement, the patron saint of metalworkers. You get the idea. If there isn't an obvious surname connection, pray to see who in heaven wants to adopt you. You might be amazed at how obviously some heavenly friend jumps on board. You can't have too many patrons, and every family can benefit by developing at least one special family intercessor. Which leads us in a roundabout way to the saint of the day. It's commonly understood by Davises of wealth extraction that Saint David of Wales is our very own. You get to claim King Saint David if your name is Davis, Davies, Davison, Daffic, Dewey, or if you just happen to be of Welsh extraction, like my own maiden family name, the Chenoweths. So this feast day is a special one here, and last March, as a gift from my dear husband, I got to visit the land of Saint David with our youngest son, William, on the feast of Saint David. And here following, I'll weave in some of the photos we took while we were there. Called Dewi Sunday in Wales, this feast is pretty much the St. Patrick's Day of the Welsh people. The early days of March find Wales awash in daffodils, the most common symbol of St. David, and Welsh flags decorate windows, doorways, and town squares throughout the country. Like St. Patrick's in Ireland, March 1st, St. David's Day, has come down as a day of national pride in Wales, with parades, concerts, and festivals celebrating Welsh music, language, and culture. We ran into a giant leek, shaking hands and taking selfies in front of the grocery store in the town of St. David's. More on that later, but in short, leeks are another symbol of Wales. And we sat in on a practice for a Sant Dewi Day concert of school children in the Cathedral of St. David's. Everywhere we went, folks had daffodils pinned to their lapels. No question there's a sense of patriotic spirit in Wales, which is a beautiful thing to see, but I'm afraid the Catholic meaning of the day has been lost. For one thing, Catholicism is so small a fraction of the population in Wales now that it's hard to find a chart that measures practicing Catholics at all. But the most recent estimate in the UK altogether shows less than 8% of the population calling itself Catholic. Sadly, the land of my ancestors fell to Protestantism badly at the time of Henry VIII and never recovered. It was the age of the saints in Wales, though, from about AD 500 to AD 700, that established the monasteries throughout the country, laying the foundation of Welsh culture. The leadership of King Saint David and other Catholic rulers of the early days formed the chief bonding factors of the country: language, music, and the Catholic faith. Unfortunately, though, the Welsh people give general acknowledgement to St. David's role in creating their national identity, especially on March 1st every year, while overlooking the fact that his defining feature, his strength, his reason for living, was his Catholic faith. When St. David was born, right around the year 500, Wales and England, all the countries we know as part of the UK, were many centuries away from being sovereign nations. St. David then was actually the king of Ceredigion, one of many unique kingdoms that emerged in Wales after Rome quit the island in the late 4th century. a population ripe for cultivation, the influence of the church would in short order civilize Wales, but not before St. David himself was born of its disorder. Another example of how God can turn evil to good, legend has it that St. David was conceived in violence by a chieftain named Xantus, and his mother, Non, who is venerated as a saint, gave birth to him on a cliff top during a violent storm. The pains of birth were said to have been such that the imprint of Non's fingers were left in the rock she grasped, and the tale goes that as St. David was born, a bolt of lightning split the rock in two. Legend has it that one of the two pieces of the split rock later became part of the foundation for St. David's Cathedral, which we visited in the county of Pembrokeshire, in the most westerly point of Wales. Though it's been preserved and still functions, the cathedral has unfortunately been taken over by the Anglicans, and St. David himself seems barely present. At the time of the Norman invasion in the 11th century, the relics of King St. David, originally housed in the cathedral, were destroyed along with the destruction of the cathedral. Again, since the founding of the church and monastery in the 6th century, St. David's had been wrecked and plundered numerous times by Vikings, and though William the Conqueror recognized the cathedral as a holy place in the 11th century, even pausing the conquest to pray at the tomb of St. David, it was ransacked and destroyed again under his watch, when the tomb of St. David was destroyed. But, as they always had, the stubborn, faithful Welsh picked up the pieces and rebuilt. Devotion didn't die easily in those early days. Sadly, though, the cathedral has been in the hands of the Anglicans since it was rebuilt after the destruction of Cromwell in the 17th century, and as far as we could find, evidence of its Catholic founding remains in one stained glass window, two statues, and one small relic of St. David in a showcase in a corner of one of the chapels. And in point of fact, the powers that be have officially removed the apostrophe from the title of the cathedral, pointedly taking away St. David's possession of the place. You get the feeling the Church of England doesn't want to draw much attention to the cathedral's Catholic roots. No surprise. Nevertheless, the antiquity of the cathedral is impressive, and those who know its history can sense the impression of all the Catholic hands that originally carved and fitted the stones of this great church, and the consecrated hands that offered the true sacrifice of the Mass on this land for so many centuries. Another piece of the rock that split at the birth of St. David is said to have been incorporated into the original building of St. Non's Chapel a few miles from the cathedral, which you see pictured here. It's a beautiful walk along the cliffs where St. David was born, and over the hill to the rebuilt chapel of St. Non, which apparently shelters swallows, and William can vouch for the acoustics. What kind of a Welshman would he be if he didn't test that out, right? The nearby Holy Well of St. Non is also a pilgrimage site, as it has been for centuries. William and I doused a good handful of rosaries in the water of this holy well and touched them to the walls of the original chapel of St. Non. There's a tradition that an angel told St. Patrick about the birth of St. David 30 years before his birth, and it can be surmised that St. Patrick's prayers contributed to the holy outcome of David's less than ideal beginning. This baby born on the edge of a cliff, also blessed by the prayers of his saintly mother, later became the pupil of another saint, Saint Paulinus. With the grace of God, these good influences, and the strength of his own will, David grew up to be a great and holy man, a lesson that truly anyone, regardless of their start in life, can become a saint. Even though he was surrounded by a warlike and half-pagan community, as you might have gathered by the circumstances of his birth, David nevertheless reached heights of grace in strength, wisdom, and piety. From his youth, despite the facts of his conception, he was considered a member of the royal house, and seemed to possess the gravitas of a true leader. Records of the day prove evidence that the young prince was a respected and well-loved leader, but instead of taking the expected path into worldly power and wealth, St. David chose to enter the religious life. Famous for his wisdom and prudence, he retained his civil influence, but parlayed his popularity into a strategy for saving souls. He became known as a great preacher and teacher and founded many churches and monasteries. Eventually becoming a bishop, he presided over 2 synods, made pilgrimages to Rome and Jerusalem, and while in Jerusalem was raised to an archbishop. The most famous miracle of his biography took place at one of the synods held in Wales. Dewisant's preaching, as was often the case, had gathered a large crowd of the faithful, too large to be contained in the nave of the town church. Making use of an open space in the town center, the crowd extended too far beyond him, however, for his voice to be heard by all present. Hearing the tumult in the back of the crowd, complaining that they couldn't hear him, our saint lifted his voice to heaven, and heaven intervened. Beneath St. David's feet a hill swelled up and rose to such a height that his voice could carry to the far edges of his flock. The village of Llanthwy-Brefi now surrounds this hill. This site is another example of the locals completely overlooking the significance of St. David in Welsh history. We were so surprised that this miraculous hill was not in the slightest bit a tourist destination, except to us. After a life of prayer, mortification, and constant work among his people for the salvation of souls, King St. David finally received his eternal reward around the turn of the 7th century, reportedly having lived to be 100 years old. His final words to his people were, "Be joyful and keep your faith and your creed. Do the little things that you have seen me do and heard about. I will walk the path that our fathers have trod before us. Do the little things in life." The same message as our Saint Therese of Lisieux, only 1400 years earlier. Now, concerning the practical celebration of the day, besides, of course, assisting at Mass, we like to decorate with daffodils, as mentioned, one of the traditional symbols of the day, which is often seen in the iconography of St. David. Daffodils and, oddly enough, leeks. You know, that vegetable that looks like a giant green onion. Daffodils became part of the celebration for the common sense reason that they're usually blooming on St. David's Day. And leeks became the thing because of one of many similar legends. Apparently, the Welsh were facing a pagan horde at one of several proposed historic battles, and in order to avoid casualties due to friendly fire, the Welsh troops were advised to wear leeks in their hats or pinned to their armor to distinguish them from the enemy. There are those who say that the only reason daffodils really became associated with Llanddwy Day was because folks didn't really want to wear onions in their lapels. Another way of incorporating leeks, if you don't want to wear them, is to prepare traditional leek soup for dinner. Recipes are easy to find online, and if you like onion soup, this is a real treat. Dan loves it. If onions aren't your thing, though, don't worry. Another traditional treat for St. David's Day is Welsh cakes, which are a kind of cross between scones and pancakes with raisins or currants. The children love them, and so do the grown-ups. But the best way we can remember this feast day is to follow St. David's deathbed advice. In so many words, and I'm paraphrasing, be joyful, stay positive, stay true to the faith and to the teachings of the Church. Do the little things in your station in life that imitate the example of the saints, finding God's will even in the mundane, offering to Jesus the little joys as well as the little grievances, and walk the path of tradition that our fathers walked before us. Do the little things. Dydd Gwyl Dewi Hapus, or Happy St. David's Day. King St. David, pray for us. Blessed be God in his angels and in his saints.